Thank you for staying with us. This is the front row. We're on to the last bit of it. We're looking at President Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy projects, the Big Four agenda allocations over the years for the Big Four agenda projects: food security, universal healthcare, manufacturing, and affordable housing. What is he leaving the country with? And I'd like now to go to Kenneth Mwige, who's the Director General of the Kenya Vision 2030 Delivery Secretariat. I believe you heard what the other co-panelists had to say. You talked about Kenya being at a point where we are building foundations. Let us start from the timelines that were put for the delivery of these Big Four projects. We're still talking about us building foundations, yet there were timelines. What has made this a slow process? And even as you answer that, Bill Okero asks, so then when do we move away from building foundations and actually start reaping from these expansive multi-billion projects? When do we say we have gotten there? Please unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me just start by reminding all of us what happened about 1895 in the UK Parliament when they were discussing the building of what was called the Lunatic Express. And for sure, everything you've heard today about SGR was said 125 years ago in the UK Parliament. It is expensive, it is going nowhere, it is overpriced, it is a waste of money, it is corrupt, this is just corruption being hidden in the colonies. If you look at the Hansard or the UK reports of the building of the old Mombasa line, the old railway line, this is exactly what was said about SGR. You can expect 100 years from now, the Kenyans will be here living, will be looking back at what we were saying as they're enjoying whatever they're enjoying. The point I'm trying to make is this: when you're doing foundational work, it is expensive. And the benefits are not automatically, they're not easily visible. They're not automatically visible. You don't just see them. Those who have ridden the SGR, who have taken time to read to ride on the SGR, will tell you that it makes a difference. If you look at the
All right, I think we have, yes, please go on.
Which are removed. Can you hear me? Yeah, you can. The effect of that is reduced accidents, reduce this, reduce that, many things. If you come back to when do we reap, it's very hard to explain to somebody, for example, who lives in Moyale, that this government has done nothing and that infrastructure projects should stop. Because somebody used to take 8 days sometimes to get home between Nairobi and Moyale. Today it takes 10 hours. I don't know whether Wanjiru has driven on that road between Nairobi, Nanyuki, Isiolo, Marsabit, Moyale. Everybody in northern Kenya is waxing lyrical about how this road has changed their lives, and from the government point of view, it has opened up northern Kenya. Talk to your friends from Turkana and ask them what has happened after the new tarmac road has been built between Kitale, Kapenguria, Lokichar, Lodwar, and on to Nadapa on the South Sudan border. Those people will tell you that that road has changed their lives. They can get to hospital, they can sell their food, they can do a lot of things. Just today, last week, I was looking at the new road between Kisii and Isabania. It has been a mud truck since independence. Now it's a tarmac road, and it's a very rich and fertile agricultural area. Those people, ask them whether the road has not helped them. You'll hear a completely different story from our armchair analysts sitting in Nairobi. If you go around this country, the whole of Western Kenya is transformed with new roads and new connections. Just roads, I'm just talking about roads. If you go to every part of the country, potholes are becoming a thing of the past. We are no longer complaining about our cars being bashed about and repair costs, etc. Now we've elevated the discussion to say, okay, this is good for us, but it's costing too much, because humans must complain. I want to talk about when these benefits will be achieved. The benefits are there. Kenyans are enjoying them right now as we speak. Vision 2030, as far as we're concerned, as far as it's being implemented by government, it is happening around us. It's not a destination. We'll not look at, on 31st of December, we'll not say, okay, everybody, open your eyes now. We are now in Vision 2030. No, Vision 2030 is a process. It's going on. And we have significant achievements and which have been achieved so far. And a lot of Kenyans in the millions are enjoying the benefits of what has happened.
So then,
and this is not just about defending government. These are facts.
I should ask this. I'm sorry to cut you short. I should ask this. So that proposal to then scale down some of these projects, given the kind of economic distress we find ourselves in, COVID-19, loan distress, our economy is not doing very well. Do we need to scale down, then perhaps give it a longer term for delivery, 2022 to 2026 in the fourth medium-term plan? Would you support that?
We will certainly scale down, but we'll scale down when it's done. There's no benefit in leaving things hanging halfway. For example, we have the extension of the line from Nairobi to Naivasha, all right? That is already happening, and it's almost complete. We need to finish the link between Naivasha and Kisumu. Why? Because we have a port in Kisumu, which needs to work. And we need to have seamless transport of goods and imports and exports into and out of Kenya and the greater East Africa region. Because we're not just talking about Kenya, we're talking about southern Ethiopia, we're talking about South Sudan, we're talking about Uganda, we're talking about Rwanda, we're talking about Burundi, we're talking about Eastern DRC, and we're talking about Northern Tanzania. As we speak right now, DRC is trying to enter the East African community. So we can't be small-minded. A government has to think long-term, has to think 50 years from now. What is the competitiveness of Kenya 50 years from now? What is the competitiveness of Kenya 100 years from now? What are our neighbors doing near us? So we're not driven by just the money in our pocket. We're also driven by future survival of this country as an economic entity. So if we sit here and say, okay, we've spent too much money, let's not spend any more money now, let's just look after the 2 shillings we have.
Yes.
Whereas your neighbors are busy expanding the economic base and their foundation.
Quickly.
You know, Ken did not answer your question on the timelines properly. Because if you're putting up a house, granted you have to do a foundation, but there must be a completion date. There must be a timeline. You cannot indefinitely say we are engaged on this exercise.
Right.
Number 2, I think already this budget does signal a reduction of this whatever, because last year, you remember that the first 2 years there was an allocation nearly 400 billion. 400,
yes,
and this time is reduced substantially, yes. and it's clearly is a sign that either the government sees that these things, the outcomes are not very clear, or they are tight in terms of resources. Right. But let me just. I want Ken to address the issue of the impact of these projects. These things didn't start this last 2018. This administration started some of these things in 2013. Some of them were not part of the Big Four. Others were, in fact, even ahead of Vision 2030. For example, the Moyale Road, beautiful road that has been done, I remember I was a member of parliament in 2003 when we went to see Kibaki and told him, that is part of the Cape Town to Cairo highway. Up to Arusha has been done, up to Nairobi has been done, Addis Ababa has done up to the border, and we pleaded with him to do. So some of the things which have been done, yes, but I think for this government, the issue about the Big Four, look at the amount of money. Recently, one of your papers, I think, did an analysis. This administration, in the last 7 years, has received more than 10 trillion shillings in revenues. Spent more than 10 trillion shillings in terms of revenues. But yes, in terms of loans, also another almost 6 to 7 trillion. And when you look at the results, Parliamentary Budget Office says the total number of roads done as at 2030 kilometers, 6,600 as at 2021. 6,000, and they costed 367 billion only. If you add SGR, 400, 500 billion, I mean, you will be at pains to explain where did these trillions go in terms of the impact. I think this is the thing you should tell us. I'd really like to bring in Wanjiru at this point, but there's something I want us to listen to from Uhuru Yatani, the CS Treasury. I'm glad you mentioned loans, because that remains one of the biggest headaches for Kenya currently. Let's take a look at what he said, then we go to Wanjiru.
But the debt carrying capacity has, however, declined. Financing of the fiscal deficit will continue to be strictly guided by the debt and borrowing policy and the annual medium-term debt strategy. Mr. Speaker, the government is implementing reforms to strengthen the institutional arrangements of public debt management by aligning the operations of the Public Debt Management Office to the PFM Act. In this respect, decisions of the day-to-day management and operations of the Public debt management shall be undertaken by the Public Debt Management Office to enhance efficiency, strengthen accountability and transparency. In addition, Mr. Speaker, during this calendar year, we have scheduled a set of debt management operations to lower costs and risk in our public debt portfolio to improve on the country's debt sustainability indicators and sovereign credit rating. I look forward to support of the August House for the amendment of public debt ceiling to enable implementation of debt management operations, including finance.
All right, I think we missed the part where he said that they came up with a proposal to increase our debt ceiling to 9 trillion. Of course, he's talking about all the ways that the government intends to manage our debt, realigning them, ensuring low cost repayment. Njoge Konyo, I want us to really put into perspective this debt issue. So we're talking about development projects, the headache of funding them, overquoting while at it, and then the bigger nightmare of debt. We're now talking about increasing our debt ceiling to 9 trillion shillings. How viable is that? Where are we going as a country with that?
As we stand, Parliament already approved the increase of the debt ceiling. And the projection is that in the next year, it will actually shoot to 11 trillion. Because as we stand, there are some debts that are not captured in the debt register because of the point I made of the fiscal indiscipline, the lack of transparency, budgeted corruption, state capture. So we have had a convergence of a number of things. One, we've had a convergence of bad policies by the Jubilee administration, and nobody is saying that we don't need roads and we don't need those investments. What we are saying is we don't want the investments that have been catapulted due to interests around the contracts are the ones that are hurting Kenyans. And those are on the record in the Auditor General's report, in parliamentary reports, in terms of those violations. So the Director General can do his PR, but I'm disappointed that the Vision 2030 has morphed into a PR arm of the executive, instead of really giving us some well-grounded proposals on our development. In terms of debt, yes, we have a crisis because, like you heard, Kenya is deindustrializing. The manufacturing sector is growing. Our exports, the returns on our exports have been going down. Our foreign denominated debt is very high and we are not able to pay it. And those interest repayments are increasing due to also the global dynamics. So we are in a very, very tight position. And there is a medium-term debt strategy that the government has been running. But again, the problem is institutions, the point I was making. Development practitioners, experience, best practice shows that countries that grow have strong institutions, strong independent institutions, not PR arms that come and give you half truths and half information. And unfortunately, the Treasury has been giving us a lot of misinformation. And even the IMF pointed out, civil society has continually pointed out, the data that they use to make their projections, even in terms of debt sustainability, that data, the veracity of that data is questionable. The sources of that data is not revealed. So, for instance, over projecting the revenues that we are going to collect is perennial. And this has happened for the last 6 years. Government is not able to meet its revenue targets, but they give us a high revenue target so that they can justify a high expenditure target and a high fiscal, and then it winds up, at the end of the day, the deficit has been growing. Right. So the point I want to make very quickly is that there are recommendations that were made to this government in terms of how to strengthen debt management. One, ensure that Parliament has a right to approve so that proposed borrowing or facilities are tabled before Parliament for them to be reviewed. This has not been done. It's a deferred promise. Adopt an accrual basis of accounting. This was a recommendation made back 5 years ago. Again, this government has not done that. strengthen the parliamentary debt, the public debt management office, make it independent. This is a battle. In fact, there is a private member's bill in parliament. So the actions that this administration could have done to instill discipline in public debt, it has not done. So, you know, actually, it is mind-boggling why a government in crisis, where the president is lamenting that 2 billion is being lost every day,
yes,
does not then take the measures.
I think let's have Kenneth respond to that. We only have 4 minutes to go, so Kenneth, I'll give you a minute. Yes.
Yeah. Am I on air? Thank you. Very briefly, let me use analogy again, because we're on national TV and everyone is watching, and not everybody is an accounting expert like the panelists. Who are respected professionals in that line, and everything they say should be taken seriously. When you buy a house, for example, on mortgage or a loan, let's just use a mortgage. You take a mortgage for 4 million shillings, for example, affordable housing. By the time you finish paying your mortgage off in 15 or 20 years, you'll have paid back something in the region of 3 to 4 times that, 15 to 20 million. You borrowed 4 million. But over the course of use of that asset, you end up paying 4 times that. Let's keep it simple here. It's not rocket science. Keep it simple. So when you look...
All right. Oh, unfortunately, we seem to have lost him, and there was... Yes.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that we need to look at the future value of the investments we're making now. We have a growing population. We have 75% of all Kenyans.
Well, technology really messing us up. Do we have him? Do we have him back to finish his point? Yes, Kenneth, my apologies. We are having some technical challenge. Well, I'll give you a minute to finish your point, please.
Okay, let me just finish. What I'm trying to say is very simple. We are investing for the future, and it's painful for the time being because there's no other way to do it. Our neighbors, the region, the world is not waiting for us to put our 2 shillings together. So we have to run with the hounds, and we have to hunt with the foxes. Finally, on the issue of corruption, yes, this maybe needs its own program, its own 1 hour to discuss corruption. But if you look at all the institutions, from parliament, from civil society, from the judiciary, all the institutions which exist in Kenya, Kenya is run by Kenyans. It's not run by Martians or people come from outer space. So if there's budgeted corruption, how is it come that there's not one single Kenyan who says, on this budget line in this ministry, this is budgeted corruption? How is it when you have all these things publicized, they're online, they're not secrets in treasury anymore? They're not secrets. How is it come that nobody can say this line item here is budgeted corruption, or that line item there is budgeted corruption? So it's very easy to sit here being an armchair analyst and just throw accusations around and say there is this, there is that. But when the rubber meets the road, really, how come nobody's talking about it?
Okay.
Where is it? Budgeted corruption.
All right.
Which line is it? Which line budget for which ministry is there budgeted corruption?
Okay, let's get closing remarks. Thank you. Thank you. 30 seconds each. Bilokero, I'll start with you. What legacy will President Uhuru Kenyatta leave behind in 30 seconds?
Of sinking this country into debt. I think there is no worse legacy than leaving your country in a crisis, a debt crisis. That means, the impact of debt crisis means what? Our cost of living, our living standards have fallen. But let me just demonstrate one point, which perhaps would explain Gikonyo's very clearly.
Yes, quickly.
Under Kibaki, you know, when you are measuring GDP, it's based, like when the president said the other day that our GDP has doubled under him from 5 to 10, it's based on inflation figures. We call it nominal. But in what the economists normally use is the real GDP adjusted for inflation. If you want to compare 1 year to that, you know, from 1 year to the next.
Right.
The difference between the real GDP and nominal GDP during Kibaki's time in 2013 when he handed over, it was more or less the same. 1 to 1 almost.
Right.
Today, according to central bank figures, the real GDP is 5 trillion and the nominal is 10. What it means is that those values we have used is because of the inflated cost of doing things. Every project, every activity that we are doing, things have been inflated. Even for the private sector consumption, which makes part of that, our cost of living has, so things have doubled. So I think we live in a country where that culture of inflating things.
We need to wind up.
You know, it's where, that's why our money is like going into a bottomless pit. We are spending trillions. All our neighbors
have to wrap up.
Are not. All our budget is all the East African countries combined for
Unfortunately,
but we are not seeing the impact.
Yes. I believe we will have to have a round 2 of this. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Not a lot of time to even go through all your tweets, but joining me tonight on the show, Wanjiro Gekonyo, National Coordinator, Institute for Social Accountability, Bilokero, former Senator Mandera, and Kenneth Mwige, Director General, Kenya Vision 2030 Delivery Secretariat. My apologies, we've not been able to go through some of your tweets. I am Akisa Wandera. I'll see you next time on The Front Row.